Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So we'll continue where we stopped a little earlier. And we were coming to Imam Qurtubi. And we were talking about the Imams, both men and women, who had such a contribution in the study of Ihsan, and how essential it is to accept the Ghayb, accept understanding of the unseen, especially in the study of Ihsan. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala classifies belief in the unseen as an essential characteristic of somebody who has consciousness of the one divine, who has taqwa. Allah says in Surah Baqarah, right at the beginning of the Alif Lam Mim, ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب. So Allah Azza wa Jalla begins with the sacred letters, Alif Lam Mim. Then He says, ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه. This is the book in which there is no doubt. هدى للمتقين. It is a guidance for people of consciousness of God, not for everyone. For people who have consciousness of the one divine, it is a guidance. الذين, those who, so defining who these people of consciousness are. يؤمنون بالغيب. الذين, first thing, who believe in the unseen. So what does this mean? People who are very, when you have consciousness of the one divine, you become very spiritual in nature. The First Nations, the ancient people, the people of whatever tradition and way, people connected to the natural world, because the natural world is an embodiment or is Allah's creation, God's creation. We know in our study of Islam, the Prophet taught us, that every creation is in worship, glorification, harmony with the source, the one divine. So people who are spiritual in nature, they tap into the rhythms, the messages, the strengths, sometimes the complaints that come from the creation, from animals, from plants, from birds, from trees, from the wind, the sky, the clouds. And now we know we are in a state where the whole of the ecological system is in complaining very, very strongly against human beings to God. Is what have we done to the environment? This name of unsustainable progress or unwise development. There's a famous story of a camel who was very, very unruly. This is in Medina, who could not be controlled. No? And the master of that camel came to the Prophet. So they said, I don't know what to do with my animal, just not listening to me. So the Prophet, he went to see the camel. And as he entered the pen of this animal, the animal was so wild and dangerous and almost crazy before, and just came to him. So Allah put his head in his hand, and so the camel's head was very close to that of the Prophet. Then he turned around and said to the companion and the people there, this animal is complaining to me about you and how you are treating her. Of course, the companion made his tawbah, and he repented immediately, and that animal gave him a family thereafter. So, of course, Rasulullah ﷺ could speak with animals like the Prophet Sulaiman alayhi, very much in tune with the natural world. When the people, the First Nations people from before the time of the ancient people who have existed before the coming of Muhammad, the coming of Sayyidina Isa, our Master Jesus, peace be upon him, the coming of Sayyidina Musa, Master Moses, peace be upon him, ancient people, First Nations people from North America, Aboriginal people from Australia, so many indigenous people, very in touch with the natural world, or they used to be. So an understanding of the Ghayb, the unseen, the spirit that flows. And when your faculties of hearing and seeing are opened, your spiritual hearing and your spiritual seeing, not your sensory hearing and sensory seeing. That is when you begin to see and when you begin to hear with your heart, not with your ears and not with your eyes. You won't believe me that this is possible unless and until you experience it. When you experience it, it is known. So this is why we say in the science of ihsan, tasting, dhawq, you must experience. Then you will believe. You cannot rationalize, you cannot imagine, you cannot be told and say, oh, maybe it's something else. No. Go and experience it. Then you know. So Prophet ﷺ experienced the angel, the archangel, Gabriel or Jibreel alayhi salam. He experienced that when the angel wrapped his arms around him and squeezed him. It is a scary, terrifying experience. He experienced the revelation of Wahy. It's not something he could come up with. And sometimes these experiences are difficult because you think you're going crazy. They're so extraordinary, out of the ordinary, so unusual, you really think you're going crazy. So, that's why you need other people who have experienced it to tell you you're not. And the Prophet ﷺ himself, who knew the ghaib in and out, who knew the unseen, taught us a lot from it. And there's quite a bit from it in the hadith literature. I do not know why, but in modern times we have left these hadith aside. And the reason that has happened is because we've left the contributions of all the many, many scholars in the past 1300 years aside. So if you sincerely want to go to the Sunnah and you start studying, for example, you begin with the Sitta, the six most accepted books of Hadith, Sahih Muslim, Imam Bukhari's collection, etc. If you really start reading all of them, you'll come across a lot of confusions and issues and contradictions. So then to clarify that, you have to read more books, and then to clarify further, you have to read more books. And then you realize, oh, you need a methodology to wade through this. So this is a lifetime's work, and if you began it, you probably wouldn't get to 5% of where you needed to go. And then we are talking about you and myself in today's world where our memory is so weak and our intelligence is so poor. 1,200 years ago, people could memorize whole encyclopedias, so we find memorizing very difficult. So people in those days came across these problems, and they, the greatest minds and the best trained amongst them, sat and in the most well-funded universities, sat and tried to work through them for 12, 13, 1100 years until the Islamic nation began to lose its wealth and its power and its position. So I don't care much about power and position, but what happens when a society or a country or a nation becomes poor is unfortunately its universities become very poor in their standard. And so a wealthy nation has the best universities. Nowadays the best universities are in the USA and in the Western world because they've been investing in them for centuries. And now as Asian superpowers are growing, they are also investing in their universities. So when the Muslim world was rich, it have the best universities, which could attract the best minds with the best scholarship, and they grapple with all of these issues. So who are we now to say that we can sit and read a little bit in our spare time and come up with better conclusions? So it's very foolish. We are sort of shooting ourselves in our own foot to throw out all the centuries of sincere Islamic scholarship. So this is why Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah doesn't do that. So, having said all of this, I want to read now from a book called the Tadhikrah and Tadhikrah, uh, the Remembrance. It was compiled by Imam Qurtubi. So I'm going to read it from my computer. So let's see. Imam Qurtubi, he was an Andalusian scholar from about 800 years ago, at the time when the Andalusian Empire in what is modern day Spain was at a very high stage of its civilization. Is known, he's a hadith scholar, so he used to bring a lot of hadith together, but he is also a scholar of Ihsan. He brought together a lot of hadith on sciences of the Ghaib, on knowledge from the Ghaib. One of those books that he brought together is called Tadhikrah fi Ahwal al-Mawta wa Umur al-Akhirah, reminder of the conditions of the dead and the matters of the hereafter. Very important book. It's a book we should read. It's important to remind ourselves of where we are going. And it's also one of the reasons that we have all the traditional practices that aid a soul upon its passing. Modern Muslims have, to a large extent, discounted them, which is a bit sad, because if they read of the true practices of Rasulullah, they realize that that period, once a person has passed into their grave, is very important. So I'm going to read one or two hadith from that, which will stop. It's already been quite long. So one hadith is in Imam So the Arabic is quite complex and very long. So I'm not going to read it to save time, but I'll read the English. But please go and refer the book. You can find it if you Google it. You can find it. So this is on page 57. Abu al-Hasan al-Qadisi, may Allah rest his soul, said, "The angels will lift up such a soul till it stands in front of Allah, who will ask it, if it is among the dwellers of paradise. He says, take it to see its place in paradise." So here the understanding that once a soul dies, if they are destined to enter paradise, they will be taken to see their eternal dwelling while they are still in the grave. And then there's the very famous, or used to be very famous, hadith of, I think it's Bara. al-Bara ibn Azib. It's a very, very long hadith, but you can even Google the hadith of al-Bara ibn Azib. So I won't read the hadith at all, but we'll read the English. Uh, Both Abu Dawud and Tayalisi and Abdul Hamid in the Musnad, and Ali ibn Ma'bad in his book Obedience and Disobedience, together with Hinad ibn Surri in his book titled Asceticism, and Ahmad ibn Hanbal in his Musnad, and others narrate this hadith. So it has quite a few sources. It is hadith sahih, but has many narrations and versions, so that makes it more uh, complex. So we'll read the one found in this book of Imam Qurtubi. Abu Dawud al-Thalisi said Abu Uwana told us, quoting Al-A'mash, quoting Al-Minhal ibn Amr from Zazan, quoting in turn Al-Bara ibn Azib, who said, we went out with the Prophet of Allah وسلم, to attend the funeral of a man from Ansar. When we reached the cemetery, he was not buried yet. The Prophet sat down and we encircled him in complete silence. Then he kept looking up and down at the sky and the earth, and then he said, I seek refuge in Allah from the torture of the grave. He said it many times, I seek refuge in Allah from the torture of the grave. I seek refuge in Allah from the torture of the grave. He said it many times. And added, when a believer approaches the end of his life and is about to die, an angel sits next to his head and says to him, come out, you virtuous soul, to enjoy Allah's forgiveness and satisfaction, and so it smoothly comes out like a drop of water coming out from a jar. He said, Amr mentioned the following part in his narration of the hadith, but Abu Uwana did not. He said, you might not see that, but white-faced angels whose faces are as bright as the sun come down from paradise carrying shrouds and scent. They sit far away from him until the angel of death takes the soul. When he does, they immediately take it, as Allah Azza wa Jal says, our angels take his soul and bring their favoring body to his Then his soul leaves the body like the sweetest perfume ever. The angels take it to heaven. Whenever they pass by any creature between the earth and the sky, he asks them, whose soul is this? And they answer, it is the soul of so and so, calling that soul with the best names possible. Then they reach the gates of the worldly sky, which open for them. So this is the first heaven. The best inhabitants of each sky bid him farewell until they reach the seventh sky. So each heaven, they go through each of the heavens. And the best inhabitants of all of these places greet the soul as it keeps rising. Then once the soul has reached the seventh heaven, it is said to him, write his record in Illiyin. This is a high place where the registers of the righteous are kept. I'm just reading what's in the bracket. All it says is, write his record in Illiyin. As Allah says in his glorious verse, and what will explain to thee, and what will explain to thee what Illiyin is, there is a register fully inscribed to which bear witnesses those nearest to Allah. And so it is written. Then it is said again, take him back, take him back to the earth. I promised them as I created them from the earth, so I will return them and then take them out once more. So after the soul has come and his name or her name written in the Illiyin, Allah says, take that soul back to the earth because I promised them that as I created them from the earth, so I will return them to the earth and then take them out once more from there. Al-Bara then added, so they return him to the earth and his soul goes back to his body. Then two austere angels come and reprimand him. They seat him and ask, austere meaning strict, who is your Lord? What is your religion? Who is your prophet? So this is when the questioning takes place, after the soul has made this journey and come back. This is a common misunderstanding. Who is your Lord? What is your religion? Who is your prophet? So he answers, Allah is my Lord, Islam is my religion. Then they ask, what do you say about the man sent to you with Allah's message? He replies, he is the Prophet of Allah. They ask him again, how do you know that? Or how did you know that? He answers, he brought us manifest verses and miracles from Allah, so I believed him. Al-Bara then commented, this is the meaning of the glorious verse that reads, Allah will establish in strength those who believe with the word that stands firm in this world and in the hereafter. So now we understand this ayah. A word that stands firm. So even when you're faced with this difficult experience of being questioned by these magnificent, strict angels, your mouth, your word will not quake, will not shake, you will speak clearly. Your words will stand firm. He added, so we go back to the hadith, then a voice coming from the sky calls out, my servant told the truth. Grant him furniture and garments from paradise and show him his place therein. So his grave is enlarged and his charitable deeds take the form of a handsome, well-dressed, sweet-smelling man who says to him, I am bringing you glad tidings of the satisfaction of Allah and the everlasting bliss of paradise. He says then to him, may Allah give you glad tidings. Who are you? Your face is laden with goodness. The man replies, this is your promised day, or he said, your promised reward, and I am your good deeds. I swear by Allah, you have always been quick in observing his orders and slow in disobeying him. May Allah reward you. So he says, O Allah, establish the last star so that I can go back to my family and property. Al-Bara said, if he, a disbeliever who indulges in the pleasures of worldly life and forgets about the day of judgment, when he approaches the end of his life and is about to die, an angel sits next to his head and says to him, come out, you vicious soul, to suffer from the wrath and fury of Allah. Then black-faced angels whose faces are as dark as the night come down from hell, carrying shrouds of fire. They sit far away from him until the angel of death takes the soul. When he does, they immediately catch it. Then his soul is divided in his body and the angels take it up, cutting his nerves and veins like a forked iron bar coming out from wet wool, giving the most disgusting smell ever. The angels take it to heaven. Whenever they pass by any creature between the earth and the sky, he asks them, whose foul soul is this? And they answer, it is the soul of so and so. Then they reach the gates of burning sky, which do not open for him. Then it is said to him, take him back to earth. I promised them that as I created them from the earth, so I will return them and will take them out once more. Al-Bara'a said, so they throw him from the sky, and he read the verse. If anyone assigns partners to Allah, he is as if he had fallen from heaven and been snatched up by birds, or the wind had swooped like a bird on its prey and thrown him into a far distant place. Al-Bara then added, so they return him to the earth and his soul goes back to his body. Then two austere angels come and reprimand him. The Siti may ask, "Who is your Lord? What is your religion? Who is your prophet?" So he answers, "Not yet." Then they ask, "What do you say about the man sent to you with Allah's message?" He cannot remember his name at the time, and they tell him that his name is Muhammad. He says, "I don't know. I heard the people say that." Then they say to him, "May you have no knowledge at all." At that point his grave is narrowed until his organs quake. His vicious deeds take the form of an ugly, hideously dressed, bad-smelling man who says to him, "I am bringing you bad tidings of the wrath of Allah and the everlasting torture of hell." He says then to him, "Who are you? Your face is laden with evil." The man replies, "I am your vicious deeds. I swear by Allah, you have been slow in observing His orders and quick in disobeying Him." Amr narrated in the hadith he reported from Minhal ibn Amr, quoting Zawazan, quoting in turn of Bara ibn Azib. The Prophet ﷺ said, "A deaf, mute creature who is equipped with a huge sledgehammer is assigned to attend to him. He hits him once so hard that every creature hears the sound except for man and the jinn. Then his soul is returned to him and he hits him again and again." So all creatures except for human beings and jinn can hear this. The hadith is reported by Abu Dawud al-Tayalisi and verified by Ali ibn Jahni, who added to it the following sentence. And so there are a few other versions of the hadith. So this is one of the long narrations. I've left out a few more details. But it is clarified that the first thing that happens for a soul before it goes to its resting place in the grave is it begins its journey to meet Allah up through the seven heavens. And if it succeeds in that, the seventh heaven door is open and paradise is shown, which is going to be its eternal home. If it doesn't succeed in this journey, that door remains closed and they don't see paradise when they're destined for hell. Which is one of the reasons why, and there's no time to go into it, but through the contribution and understanding and unveiling the kashf of many, many teachers in the past so many hundreds of years, many, many elevated souls who have reached high states of closeness with Allah. The practice of trying to do as much good for that soul in those 40 days, which we believe is the period of traveling, is maintained. So that even if this person has not accumulated much good during their life, and may that not be the case, but at least they have left behind people who love them, maybe righteous children who will pray for them, and we pray in the strongest way possible using the Quran, praying, showing Allah. We dedicate all of this to Allah. We pray upon it, which is a very great prayer. Again, from the Sunnah, best way to pray, asking Allah to shower His mercy, subhanahu on that person. So their rank is elevated in this crucial period, and the door of paradise is opened, and they see their home in paradise, maybe at a higher level in paradise than they reached where they were in dunya. Because paradise also has levels. When you cross the seventh heaven and the doors of paradise are opened, then you have the 8 levels of paradise itself. So this is one reason we do as much as we can to help that soul in its journey. And I hope and pray that when we also, our soul leaves our body, we have people who will be helping and assisting us in our journey then and not forget us. So may Allah forgive us, may Allah protect us, may Allah protect us from the punishment of the grave. May Allah grant us to be among those He chose us to be His righteous beloved servants. And may Allah help us in every aspect of our lives. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا حبيبنا شفيعنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. السلام عليكم.